Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Anybody? He picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! We'll see you next week, but until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast on this Tuesday edition. I am Sterling Holmes. You can follow me on the X at HomestretchKC, joined as well by JB Brisco. You can follow him on the X at JB Brisco. Shout out to a guy helping around Brisco's house who said he listens into the Arrowhead Addict guys, and Brisco responded with, "I'm just getting ready to hop on that podcast." So shout out to you.
Shout out to Luke.
Shout out to Luke.
He's not hearing it right now, but he's just outside my window. We were just chatting as he's helping with some lawnscaping around here, and we were chatting about work and football and all of that, and he specifically mentioned that Arrowhead Addict crew, and I said, well, that's actually what I have to go do at 3. So I'm in here getting to look at your beautiful face, Sterling, and Luke is getting the job done in the yard right now.
Yeah, good for Luke. Good for everyone who's here joining us, hanging out with us, and going to have some fun with us today. I'm going to talk about, obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs, DeAndre Hopkins, some AFC news as well. The Chiefs moved to 7-0. And quite frankly, two talking points I really want to get into. The Chiefs offense, is it ready to break out? Okay, that's number 1. And 2, is the national media, are they illiterate? Do they not know what the word fraud means? Are they just haters? There's a lot I want to unpack in that. I do want to give some thoughts, some prayers to Mooney Ward, Travarius Ward. His daughter passed away unexpectedly, 1 year old. Just a horrendous situation. Just keep them in your thoughts and prayers. I mean, I always loved Mooney Ward here in KC. He was always part of the community. That just, you never want to see a parent burying a child. So, just keep the Ward family in your thoughts right there. But Brisco, as we are here on this Tuesday edition, as I laid out what we're going to talk about, anything that catches your eye right there, anything you're like, yeah, I want to get into that too.
I mean, listen, you didn't mention the addition of Joshua Uche. I do think, as you alluded to, the Deontay Johnson trade that just happened is a very interesting one. He's not a Kansas City Chief. He is a Baltimore Raven. But yeah, man, it has been a really, 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 really busy week around here, which I think is a good thing by and large as we get closer to the trade deadline.
Yeah, let's talk about Uche. Let's talk about Joshua Uche heading to Kansas City from New England. He is ranked, 25th or 28th this year in, according to PFF, as a pass rusher, which is, hey, that's good. Top 32, that's ideal. Top 64, I will even take, but top 30, you're going to be pretty thrilled by. He is a situational pass guy, so don't expect to see Joshua Uche out there a ton. Don't expect him to be out there on first and second down perpetually. He is going to be, quite frankly, what I think FAU, what we thought he might be this season, but this is a veteran who has been there, who has done that. He is being traded to KC from New England for a 6th rounder, and not a 6th rounder in this year's draft, but in 2026. Again, for what we thought might have been a seller's market this year, it really isn't. Thought there was a lot of buyers. There are a lot of buyers, but the sellers are getting fleeced right now. He's a guy who had double-digit sacks in 2022. 23 had a little bit of a drop-off, a little bit of a different season. New England as a whole had a little bit of a drop-off, but he's trying to revamp his career. Final year of this contract, right? So, and by the way, for everyone listening, you'll see his name. He prefers to be called Joshua Uche. Just to try and lay that out as far as what his preference is. So let's welcome him into Chiefs Kingdom. At Brisco, what are your thoughts on the Chiefs landing him?
I think the price, the player, the position group all makes total sense. And just as the context for generally my perspective on a lot of this, as I say this all the time now, I am not a bleep them picks guy. I do like draft picks. I do like rookie contracts. I don't think that draft picks or the salary cap are complete fiction. And yet, I think the process here was good. I think the price tag here is good. Our friend Seth Kaiser has, I think, maybe a smidge timidly upon reviewing the film, is in a mode where he is perhaps ready to argue that Joshua Uche may be the second best pure pass rusher on this defensive line now behind Chris Jones. Now, as you mentioned, that's not as an all-around player. It is point A to point B being the quarterback. But also, there was an analyst who you may recognize the name of. I don't know. I saw him say something about Uche yesterday. William Belichick, I think. He goes by Bill. Let's say Bill Belichick, maybe. If I chat, let me know. If I get the pronunciation wrong, let me know. But it's this guy on the Pat McAfee show.
Yeah, he's a Pat McAfee guy, right?
Yeah, he's on with McAfee. Sometimes he wears like hoodies without super long sleeves.
Was he a defensive coordinator for a little bit?
I think he was a defensive guy, and contrary to the rest about his aesthetic, people are always talking about his rings. I guess he likes jewelry, I suppose. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with his work. But when Bill Belichick talked about Joshua Uche right after the trade, I'm just going to read you a blurb of what Belichick said about him, because Belichick drafted him and coached him for the first 4 years of his NFL career, of Uche's career, obviously. That means that is the defensive player, defensive coach, most decorated head coach in NFL history. Here's what he said about Uche. He's a really good rusher. He hasn't had a chance to rush much this year for the Patriots because they've been behind a lot and the situation hasn't been good, but he had a big year 2 years ago. Now he had Judon on the other side of him, so there was two good pass rushers, but he'll have a lot of opportunities to rush in Kansas City. I think he'll really help them. He's got surprising power for his size. He's got excellent quickness and a good get off, and he has some flexibility in coverage. The Spagsy part of that, there are a few Spagsy parts of that. The part that's exciting to me is surprising power for his size, because Spags likes guys with unsurprising power because they're monsters. Like an ideal Steve Spagnuolo defensive end is 6'8" with 6 foot long arms, and Tano Passanio just build through and through, right?
You almost pulled a Jerry Jones right there. I got a little nervous.
I saved it. Big bodies, lots of power, strong on the end. George Karlaftis checks a lot of those boxes. We've talked about Mike Dana, obviously, when healthy at his best. He can be kind of your edge setter, but those are not pure pass rushers in that way. Karlaftis is a very good all-around player. None of this is to denigrate him. But if Uche can carry his weight and what Spags typically asks for from his defensive ends, if he can do that on an occasional first and second down, in addition to being a situational pass rusher who's out there to get after the quarterback on a frequent basis, the entire defensive line just got significantly better. And I think, again, I know this sounds like another George Karlaftis dig. It's really not. But when and if healthy, I think Charles Omenihu is the best defensive end on this roster in terms of what he can be at peak performance. Now, look, he tore his ACL in January. I don't know that we're going to see peak Charles Omenihu. I don't know if we're going to see peak Mike Dana, who's been dealing with a handful of injuries throughout the year. So I think this bolsters a group that isn't desperately thin like wide receiver was pre-Hopkins, and even as it still sort of is, or as the cornerback group a little bit thin now. Defensive end, this is adding a piece that could be a luxury, it's too practical to be a luxury, and it's too good of a price to be a luxury. It's a nice deal. The Chiefs got a nice deal on a really useful player. I think that, for me, is the short summary of a lot of interesting things.
It's almost like when the Chiefs brought in Drew Tranquil as a free agent. They weren't necessarily looking there, but they're sitting here going, well, this is a great deal. Why wouldn't we bring this guy in?
That's a fun
You
call.
see Joshua Uche, you're saying, well, this is a great deal. Why wouldn't you bring him in? You can get two birds stoned at once because edge rushers are really making impact on cornerbacks as well, right? So the cornerback market wasn't progressing the way you thought. Well, how do you help that? Well, get a quicker pass rush. With the Chiefs, that's been their weakness of the defense so far. The defense has been great in totality. This is not necessarily a massive knock, but that would be the one non-elite aspect of this defense is overall the edge rushers not getting a quick pass rush win. So maybe Joshua Uche can help out there. I also wonder What this means for Cam Thomas,
Yeah.
probably not good.
No.
What does this mean for FAU? You're going for a three-peat. You're not necessarily in the business of developing this season. I don't think it shuts the door on FAU, who I think has actually been okay this year. I mean, he hasn't been great, but I think FAU's been okay. You still need more defensive end help, so I'm not worried there necessarily. But the two things that I think this has the biggest impact on, if I'm going to read between the lines, Mike Dana with the pec injury, right? He's missed the past 2 weeks. Is it more serious than we expected? What's going on with Dana? That could be something to monitor with Joshua Uche, although they're both very different style of players. Mike Dana's more of a first and second down run stopper, while Uche is going to be get after the passer. And then Amenahu. What's this mean? Does this mean they think he might be longer? Does it mean that when he comes back, they don't have extremely high expectations? Or maybe it doesn't matter at all. But I do find it, at least for me, you have a you have something, you have a floor here. You have a known quantity versus let's hope Charles Amenahu comes back and he's the same guy we saw last year. At least for me, I like this move again for a 2026 sixth rounder.
Yeah, I'll try to speed run some of those things that you mentioned because I think they're all intertwined. Coverage and pass rush always plays off of each other. There's been some interesting theorizing and some research even over the last 5 to 10 years about would you rather have a great secondary or a great pass rush? Should you build from the front or the back defensively? Obviously, again, it does all intertwine. And so I think that's an easy one to add on to. Cam Thomas, the 3 games he's been active this year, the 3 games that Dan has been out, 3 snaps, 0 snaps. We're getting Neil Farrell'd here. I don't know. I mean, even if you liked his tape, if you thought that it was a logical move at the time, which I did, I get it. I understand looking at him and thinking, oh, that guy should be involved somehow, right? The Chiefs have decided, no, he shouldn't be. It's still relatively early, I guess you could say. You know, he's getting more comfortable in the scheme or whatever. Well, Uche has less time from here on out than Cam Thomas was ever going to get. So I don't know that I really buy that either. I think it's a bad sign for Cam Thomas. I don't think it's. I'll say this about FAU. He had a pretty good PFF grade and he played a lot of snaps against the Raiders. If FAU was having a breakout year, they don't make this move. He's also not having a disastrous year. They're not afraid to play him, and he's not a liability on the edge. That's not what you want from a first round pick. If he was a third round pick, I think you'd be saying, hey, you know what? Felix looks in year 2, that end of third round dart you threw at that really young defensive end out of a local school, I think that he's coming along well. So his draft slot may have some implication throughout that. I think for Amenahu, it's just a redundancy thing where you can say again, I similarly with FAU, I don't think that they are in red alert territory on Amenahu. I don't have any feeling that they've gotten bad news that he's had a setback. It seems like he's pretty much on the timeline still. You never. Something else. Here's actually the part that I left off the Belichick quote. I think it's a good addition for a team that needs another pass rusher, which everybody does. Josh can do that. He'll definitely help them. It is a team that kind of did need another pass rusher. Even with a Amenahu back, you could use another pass rusher because everybody always could, especially with Uche. If he's a guy that can do, I don't want to compare him to Leo Chanel because that's kind of wild on a variety of levels. It's kind of reverse engineering that. Chanel got some real edge snaps on Sunday, and he's gotten some throughout the season. If you have Uche over there and you know that he, as a linebacker in the Patriots system and figuring out his kind of hybrid role, if you say, hey, you can line up a defensive end and drop into a shallow coverage and freak out this quarterback and now overload pressures coming from the other side, it seems like that could play into Uche's skill set in a way that plays into what Spags likes to do. So versatility and a little extra depth at a position that you can always use more versatility, more depth at a very low cost. I'm really happy with it.
I want to talk more defense with you in a moment. I do want to talk some offensive breakout with you in a moment. And I think the one of the fun ones I want to get to right after this is just some NFL media talking points that I find just absolutely hilarious.
Sure.
Seriously, so it's so funny. I think you might have to put me in an institution. That's what hilarious means, which is I'm insane. So, but before we do that, Underdog. Underdog is the move. Big fan of Underdog Fantasy. And if you want to join, make sure you download the app today. Use code Arrowhead Addict, one word, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, that's code Arrowhead Addict, all one word, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. I love Underdog for a multitude of reasons. One, if your fantasy football team is ass, I drafted McCaffrey, but he's coming back. Okay, I'm actually turning things around, but earlier on, I was very upset by it. You can do daily or weekly fantasy right there on Underdog. I've had a lot of fun doing that. You can do Thursday night football coupled with Monday night football. You can do Monday night football coupled with Thursday night football. You have Sunday night. You have a whole slate of games, an array of games, if you will, a buffet almost. A poo-poo platter of games are available for you to choose from during the draft. And obviously, you can do the higher or lowers, which are just so much fun. Plus, again, you have a lot of injury protections thrown in there as well. The injury protections are outstanding. If you have Jaden Daniels, for example, he plays a game, he gets hurt early in the game, what happens? Well, they just basically block that out. No longer are you a loser. They will still make you a winner right there on Underdog. So make sure you use code Arrowhead Addict to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly right there. You must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona 1-800 next step 1-800-639-8783 or text next step to 53342. New York, call 24/7 hope line at 1-877 hope hope NY or text hope NY 467-369. I had to take a break halfway through. I had to catch my breath.
Nothing in the world is as good but sounds as bad as a poo-poo platter.
Yeah.
I think it has the widest ratio of is great, sounds like the worst thing possible.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair.
P-U-P-U.
Even
that sounds gross.
National media.
Okay.
Mike Renner was talking. You've heard folks talk all year long. And what I find really funny, frauds. I heard him say this is the worst 7-0 team in the NFL. Well, they're the only 7-0 team in the NFL, guys. So I guess technically that would be the worst, also the best, and the only. If they play the Detroit Lions, they're getting beat 35-10 because as one thing we know is this defense gives up more than 28 points. It's not like they have a long streak going that of them giving up 30-plus points, right? How they win is unsustainable. You mean the team that is the only undefeated team that's won 13 straight games, that's won back-to-back Super Bowls, and this roster is better than last year's roster? That team that's winning unsustainably? And also, when you talk about frauds, you talk about teams that are outperforming what they should be doing, right? The Chiefs have a quarterback who has more interceptions than touchdowns. The Chiefs are -3 in turnover differential. All signs point to them playing their D or C game at best, and they're still undefeated. How does that make them frauds? If you wanted to pick a fraudulent team, I'm not saying this team is, by the way, you'd pick like the Vikings. Like Sam Darnold's never been good, and all of a sudden he's having a resurgence this season. That would be the definition of fraudulent. This Chiefs team, who is clearly not playing their best football, who are the back-to-back Super Bowl champions, who are the only undefeated team, that team, according to the national media, is the fraudulent one? Pound sand, kick rocks. What are you smoking?
Meanwhile, I have the Chiefs ESPN page up. I just have it bookmarked. It's usually a good place to make sure you see, the schedule and the standings and the stats leaders. I just use that page pretty frequently. And the top Chiefs story is a video from one of the studio shows from this morning, presumably. Will the Chiefs finish the regular season undefeated? And I mentioned that not in any way whatsoever to argue against the existence of the takes you just laid out. We've seen and heard those takes. Sterling is not making them up. A couple of those I have not actually heard directly. I imagine you are pulling from specific examples.
Correct.
Losing to the Lions 35-10 is maybe the silliest of those somehow to me. I don't know. And then on the other end of the scale, it's okay. Well, maybe we should talk about, can they go undefeated? Can they run the table? And this, to me, truly is I'm going to try to figure out how much I admit here and how much I share. I watch and consume very, very, very little national media. The people that I do consume, not exclusively, but just for a couple of examples, I will listen to Mina Kimes' podcast, Kevin Clark's podcast, pretty frequently check in on the Athletic Football Show. Some places that are strictly about football and that pride themselves on getting into the weeds. And that for me is to get a national perspective, because obviously the Chiefs media network that we all kind of share a web in keeps us well informed throughout all of that. But when I want to know what's going on through the rest of the league, I've got like 3 or 4 national media sources that I trust consistently because they don't play this game. The 2 most prevalent Chiefs conversations this week is, are the Chiefs frauds versus will the Chiefs go undefeated? And that, unfortunately, is a pretty good summary of where we're at. I think that media is going to have some sort of pretty strong evolution over the next 5 years or so. I don't know what, but it feels like the space we're in is pretty unsustainable in large part. And I'm going to shout out the ones that I've been able to participate with, in large part to places like Arrowhead Addict doing podcasts like this, in large part to places like KC Sports Network doing podcasts like the one I'll do in about an hour. In large, let's say ChiefsOnSI.com or ArrowheadAddict.com, places that are trying to bring you actual information and analysis that goes deeper than are they frauds or are they going to run the table. That's the stuff that by and large does latch on. We, against all odds, we do have people watching and listening right now. I don't think that's an accident, because you could turn on any of the channels, any of the national, ESPN, FS1, whatever. You could grab some random podcast that you find talking about the entire league on YouTube, and you've got to work a lot harder to find good content and good analysis than you do to find the Pringles of analysis, which is a bunch of factory-made, homogenous, fit it in a can. Once you pop, you can't stop. Sit on the couch and house this entire sleeve type of analysis, which is the stuff that you're by and large talking about. I saw the Mike Renner clip and I was bummed because Mike Renner, when he's not at a desk looking for a hot take, can provide some really useful information. Dominique Foxworth is the guy I see on the thumbnail here talking about the Chiefs going undefeated. Dominique does really good work. I promise you he was not the guy. I don't know this for sure. I'm just pretty confident. He was not the guy in the production meeting that said, hey, can we talk about if the Chiefs are going to run the table? And I'm guessing in the clip he's probably saying some form of it. That's not. No, probably not. And not the point right now. But that's how everything gets framed. We've got to go to one binary or the other. Happy election season, I guess, where like people have gotten to the point where debate television is the thing that you tune into. Stephen A. Smith has now started doing sports debate television on political channels, which is a whole other muscle that he's just showing that he's better at it than anybody. The political commentators cannot keep up with that level of energy. They just don't have it. And it just bums me out because there are a lot of places doing really good analysis. Typically, I think sites or networks or whatever that is mostly devoted to one team or at least one market, that's where there's a lot of value in this game. And right now, I hate that we have to spend any breath rolling our eyes at just this like random shot from the bow off the bow of like, yeah, no, they're either frauds or they're perfect, while both of those are objectively untrue.
And that's what it comes down to. I don't think the Chiefs are going 17-0 or 20-0 if you want to go all the way to the Super Bowl. No, they're not blowing teams out like the 07 Patriots did, which if you want to look at like something wild, look at the 07 Patriots. Look at those scores. It is pretty wild. But actually, funny, I don't mean to pull another Bill Belichick move here, but he even talked about it. You got to learn how to win games 17-14. Like he was talking about Detroit. Like you can't just win games 52-14 or 52-10. Like you have to eventually play a close game. What happens? Well, which is even funnier. He picked those numbers because what was the game they lost in the Super Bowl?
Oh, wow.
17-14. So like that, it actually made it pretty funny. And the Chiefs are so good in close games. And that's where I guess I don't get where this is coming from. It's why it kind of leads me into my next discussion here with you. It's why I think the offense is close to breaking out. You might watch this offense and say, Sterling, what are you talking about? This offense looks abysmal at times. They are rushing the ball more than ever. And you look at the yards per carry, and they're not great. But look at the efficiency numbers. That's what I try and look at. The Chiefs are one of the most efficient running teams in the NFL. The Chiefs just this last week were 12 of 16 on third down. I'm not saying you want to get to that many third downs, but also look at the third down yardage they have to pick up. How often is it 3rd and 10? It's 3rd and 2. It's 3rd and 3. Like, that's what I think we need to start looking more at, not just these. It's almost like baseball, when originally it was all average, RBIs, and home runs. Those are a good jumping off point. I'm not saying they don't matter. I think when people say average in baseball doesn't matter, I think you're being a little bit oversimplistic there at this point. Now you're trying to almost say that doesn't matter at all. But when there's a guy on third base, 2 outs, and you need a single, well, a walk's not going to help you there. You need a single. You need to drive it. So again, same thing with yards per carry. It's a good thing, but it's not the end-all be-all. This Chiefs offense has been ahead of the sticks a lot recently. The penalties are starting to go down, especially with Juwan Taylor, who was an absolute brick wall against Max Crosby. Wanya Morris we can get to. I
That's
guess
what the Raiders said leading up to the week as well. Wanya Morris we can get to.
Yeah, but like, that's good. But yeah, like as Cliff Johnson says, the majority of NFL games are one-possession games. That's the point of the NFL.
Yeah.
They want parity. Why does the best team draft last and the worst team drafts first? Why is there a salary cap? It's not baseball. They want parity. And the Chiefs find ways to win one-score games while, again, being one of, not the worst, but they are negative in turnover differential. With having a quarterback who we all agree is the best quarterback in the world, who has more interceptions than touchdowns. The red zone is finally starting to switch around from all field goals to touchdowns, and you're seeing it result in 28 points, 26 points, 27 points. The more I think about it, as DeAndre Hopkins starts to get more involved, and we're seeing again what that's doing to Travis Kelce, even him on the field, just allowing Kelce to get open more often. You're seeing Xavier Worthy get open perpetually. The drops aren't great. But I left that game being more enthused because of how open he was getting. And Mahomes is looking his way. Why are we talking about if or not this is sustainable, and instead talking at least a little bit more about how I think they're pretty darn close to an offensive breakout?
I'll go ahead and toot our horn and make this the follow-up to my last take as well. We are talking about that. We have been saying since week 2, 3, 4, hey, you know what? This is actually a pretty efficient group. Certainly week 5, 6, 7. We definitely talked about this over the bye. This is a pretty efficient, successful group that isn't able to punch it in the red zone right now. Or this is not Patrick Mahomes' best football, and I don't think that that's going to stick around. The Chiefs have been like a prime regression to the mean candidate in a positive sense, positive regression, because that we've seen, I think, more fluky stuff that has held them back to this point this season. It all intertwines to where I think, again, it goes back to the fact that the way we've analyzed this team, the way that other people have analyzed this team has become foolish, because the analytically minded way to look at it, the film watching way to look at it, the ball knowing way to look at all of this is to acknowledge, oh, well, they are the Chiefs. They have Mahomes. These players are all still pretty much there. The defense is great. The outlier is red zone and weird turnovers. This isn't a huge mystery then. It's the red zone and weird turnovers. Two places you expect them to be at. Weird turnovers are not going to persist at that rate, although they did persist again one more time, at least against the Raiders. Those weird turnovers are not going to persist at that rate, and they have room to improve by simply like handing the ball to Kareem Hunt in the red zone. It didn't work every time against the Raiders either. But that's all right there in front of them. So in the argument of like the Chiefs offense is nearing breakout status, I agree with the idea that the offense is getting better and that continued rise is going to continue. I don't know what a breakout, air quotes, breakout Chiefs offense would look like, because their ceiling has been so astronomically high in past years. I don't know how good it would have to be for them to get credit for being one of the best offenses in football again. But that's not our problem, and it's not Andy Reid's problem. Credit is not the problem. That doesn't mean that the results are the only thing that matters. I was talking about this a bunch last night. Like, the process of all of this certainly does matter. We have to evaluate the process, because if you wait for the results, I have nothing to add. You're not analyzing, you're just reacting if you're waiting for the results, right? But looking at who this team is, the process of how they've gotten here, and I'm with you, the idea that they're going to continue improving offensively as the season goes on, not just because we hope they will, but because we have evidence that there will be positive regression to the mean. Chiefs fans are not nearly as stressed out as analysts talking about the Chiefs on television. I'll say that.
Yeah. A couple questions and comments I want to get to right there. Slothy style. Yeah. The last 2 games, Chiefs have been great in the red zone. 7 of 9, 7 touchdowns and 2 field goals, 0 turnovers. That is ideal. That is not necessarily an outlier. It's not like it's 9 for 9 and you're getting stuffed. That's a little bit on the high side, but that's realistic. That's good. Again, the Chiefs have traditionally not been a great red zone team in the Andy Reid era. Since I think Mahomes took over, they've been top 10 once and they were second. They've been 11th a couple of times. We've done this exercise a few times on the show, so I apologize. I don't want to bring that necessarily back up again. But again, if you can be top 15, top 12 in red zone efficiency with the best defense or one of the best defenses in football in a really good special teams unit overall, that's a Super Bowl contender. That's a Super Bowl winner, as we have seen from last season. Raiders fan says Chiefs got lucky. Huh. I guess they've gotten lucky 3 years in a row now, huh? Crazy. They must be leprechauns.
What a wild thing to apparently genuinely.
He's a nice Raiders fan. He joins here a lot. So we appreciate you, DDT. We appreciate
Lucky's just the wrong word.
Yeah, lucky is not the word. I want to give a huge shout out to Anonymous Mango. Appreciate the super chat. Anonymous says, would you rather trade for a corner or a left tackle?
Rather trade for Nico Remigio. Mango, where's your boy? They called up Montreal Washington, Mango. Where's your boy?
What do you think?
I don't think they're trading for a tackle. I don't know. Yeah. I hear for 2 reasons. It's corner for me for 2 reasons. One is that I think if you need to make another left tackle change, it's you hopefully have seen something from Kingsley. I'm not sure they're going to do that. I don't know if you need to do that. I don't know. I'd like to see Kingsley back out there again at some point, but I think they'd like to have consistency. We'll see. I think that there's probably a world in which there is some like former 2nd round corner who's a CB5 on a not very good team right now, who Brett Veach would give up a 2027 6th rounder for to bring in and to try to get up to speed. But I also don't think that they're going to acquire somebody who immediately jumps Najee Johnson or Joshua Williams or Chris Roland Wallace for that matter. It's not the same thing as like an Andy Reid wide receiver, obviously, but there is something to be said for having guys that know the system. So I would bet on neither of them happening right now. Not like I'm not here to put a taser bet down or anything, but I think a corner is more likely than a tackle. I think they're both less likely than 50-50.
Yeah, I'm with you, by the way. I think tackle's pretty much out of the equation. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you bring in
you want a veteran tackle, call Donovan Smith, right? I mean, they could do that.
They could, and I would wonder how
anything?
the breakdown would look. And you're right. How much better is he? Let me get into Wanya Morris very briefly here, because I know I spoke about it after the game. I talk about him a good amount, and I know people are probably sick of me talking about Wanya Morris.
You should be talking about if the Chiefs are frauds.
I don't want to judge him in totality off of his worst game. And I think I've seen a lot of people doing that. I think a lot of people are pointing to that Raiders game and saying, look how bad he is. This can't happen. This is unsustainable. You have to bring in a left tackle. You're going to get Mahomes injured, all this stuff. Morris was bad. Morris was really, really bad against the Raiders. But I, again, don't want to judge him off of his worst game in the NFL. Now, I know the Chiefs kind of did that with Kingsley. They gave him like 1.5 game and said, you know what? No, we've seen enough, even after naming him the starter out of OTAs and training camp and preseason, which is a little surprising. They had a quick hook with him. But with Wanya, he's been okay. Like, he's been okay this entire season. It's not like he's been an issue. He'll have a snap or 2 a game where you're like, okay, he got beat, which is normal. That's normal for a 3rd round, 2nd-year tackle who's still finding his footing. Last game can't happen. If that happens again this upcoming week against the Buccaneers, then I'll revisit this conversation with a lot different sort of tone. But I don't want to judge him and just blame that one game and say that's who he is. I think that's a little unfair. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think the thing that I was gonna say that you ended up hitting on is that I'm just gonna snooze this until next week for the most part. The concern that I have with Wanye is that I think last year you saw him almost start better than he finished, perhaps. If that's happening again this year, if there's a downward trend of if it's other teams being more ready to face him and have more film on him. He played last year, so I don't know if that's really what's going on, but you can get more. It's something that like Frank Clark talked about years ago, the like notebooks that he had to prepare for the tackles he was going to face. There's more film work in there than we ever really get into the weeds about, because I think you almost need a tackle or a defensive end to come in and show you their notebook after their career is over. Maybe Frank Clark will do the show with us in a year or two. I don't know. I'd be happy to do that. But I want to see what Morris. I want to see what Morris looks like against Tampa. They're kind of an interesting group because it's a different style of defense, obviously. And just you mentioned his name, Juwan Taylor was effing nails against Max Crosby on Sunday, which we just have to. I need to say that out loud. I'm going to say it twice. Juwan Taylor shut down Max Crosby, and I think all but 3 of those snaps were one-on-one, according to Next Gen Stats. It was 25 of 28 were one-on-one, and Juwan Taylor did not allow a pressure from Max Crosby. Max Crosby didn't create a pressure. I think he may have gotten Wanye on a play that ended up having a flag, or one of the holds.
A couple.
Yeah,
he got him a couple times. So it's a little unfair when they're like doing the whole like he didn't have a pressure. It's like, well,
I agree.
He had pressure on like 3 different penalties that he caused Wanye Morris to have, but I get the point.
But not against Juwan Taylor though. Taylor was not the recipient
Juwan
of any of those. But so yes, you're exactly right. I think the Crosby stat is a little bit unfair because he didn't get a sack. He did force a couple of holds, right? So anyway, I think you got if they haven't seen a lot from Kingsley, and if the Chiefs aren't in panic mode about Wanye right now, you run Wanye back out against the Bucs, and I don't even know that you got to tell him this. He probably knows. I got a first-round pick behind me who I took the job from. And I've held on to that job throughout, but I had one really bad game. And if I have another really bad game, even though it's a, Monday Night Football against an NFC team, if I give Andy Heck and Andy Reid, and more importantly, Patrick Mahomes, cause for alarm in this game, I might not finish it. Maybe it's Kingsley mid-game. Maybe it's let Wanye through, and then you make Kingsley the starter, having a full week to prepare the week after that. But I am noticing how bad of an effort that was from Wanye. I am aware of the fact that there is a second round pick. I think I said a first rounder a second ago, but a second round pick that they traded up to acquire. Kingsley is still the best case scenario for this team in the long term. Wanye has to make the case that he's the best case scenario short term, and then he can figure out long term again in next year's training camp. But there is a real sense of urgency for him now that I think is earned. I think that's fair. I would not, to your point, go so far as to call it on Wanye Morris after that game, despite the fact that I think he may be trending in the wrong direction a little bit.
Yeah. I will also point out, I think when the Chiefs make a move, if they make a move, that'll be the final one of the season. I don't think you can keep shuffling these guys in and out game after game. I think once they make a move, they need to stick with it. So,
and that's part of the math you're doing, right? If you think, all right, we can throw Kingsley back out there. Oh, yikes, he just got sunned on Monday Night Football. Okay, next week. You don't want to have that revolving cycle, particularly with the fact that often earned and some of it unearned, Patrick Mahomes' weakness this year has been trusting his protection. Again, sometimes he's not trusted his protection and the protection's been fine. Sometimes he has trusted the protection and then he's gotten walloped. So there's a little bit of ebb and flow there, but that is like the most important thing to stabilize for this offense now that the wide receiver room looks at least more stable, although still perhaps a bit thin for my tastes.
As far as the cornerback room, we can just touch on this briefly because we'll probably do a deep dive at some point, and we've talked a lot about the cornerback room in general. Obviously, with the loss of Jalen Watson, that hurts because he'd been playing like a legit CB2, bordering on a back-end CB1. He had been outstanding. McDuffie is still doing McDuffie things, one of the best cornerbacks in all of football. Christian Roland Wallace looked really good his first game against the Niners. Played about 15 or so snaps, looked really good. Little larger role this past week against the Raiders. Didn't look quite as good, but he's a slot corner only, so he's not going to help you on the outside there. What I had been noticing was Chamari Connor. Yeah, Shamari Connor had been trending actually out of the slot. You know how he kind of started off as a slot corner this year? His snap count in the slot had been perpetually going down game after game. That was just something I noticed. Then, of course, all of a sudden you see Christian Roland Wallace. Made a little bit of sense there. Outside, though, Najee Johnson.
Can I say one thing about Roland Wallace real quick? Just we're not going to come back to it. He had a nice blitz out of the slot that I went back and watched a few times to make sure. Spags being comfortable sending him out of the slot on a blitz is an important thing. Like that's a little detail on the cornerback conversation that I think we got to keep an eye
on. Fair.
But he is the slot guy, and the outside is the problem right now. To your point.
And so I'm sitting here going, Najee Johnson has been okay. He's been a mixed bag. He's been more I think bad than good, but now he's a concussion, and that sucks. I feel for him. I do. That's no fun. And the fans who wish injuries on players, you're just the worst. I always tell people I will never tell you how to fan, but the people who are like, there was someone cheering that Najee Johnson got injured. That really bugged me.
You did that for Najee Johnson? He tore his ACL in training camp a couple years ago. Like,
Najee Johnson's mom came out and was like tweeting, was like, "This is not what we're going to do." I'm like, "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson, for showing me this person who I'm making sure I does not come across my Twitter account ever again."
Wild,
like,
yeah.
It's weird to me. But he hadn't been playing great football, but still, he was a known quantity, someone who you at least, to an extent, knew what you were getting out of. Joshua Williams has really fallen. I don't know what to expect from Williams at all anymore, which is wild considering he was actually pretty darn good last year. So there are some concerns. I went through it. There's not a whole bunch of names that you're going to be thrilled about as far as on the practice squad or back into the roster. Keith Taylor might be getting an opportunity, right? Keith Taylor could be that guy. Nick Jones, who's also a slot corner. I don't think he'd be the guy because he's more of a slot corner. And then a couple other smaller names on the practice squad in the back end. Where do the Chiefs go? If Najee Johnson's, I don't know if he is or is not yet, but if Najee Johnson does not play against the Buccaneers, where do the Chiefs go on the outside?
He's got an extra day since it's Monday night, but obviously, you can't rush a concussion. And if he's just back after missing one game, you'll take that for a head injury. I think Joshua Williams is the next man up. The weird thing about him is, to the best of my knowledge and understanding and paying attention, when he doesn't seem to have a very good feel for zone coverages right now. There have been a couple of instances where you kind of see him either drifting too far back or not quite closing in where he needs to be, that ends up putting other people in bad positions, despite the fact that he has the length and the size and the physicality to be a pretty good press man corner. I think when you're thinking about the best Joshua Williams snaps through his career so far, you're probably thinking about him hitting a guy at the line of scrimmage and then going stride for stride down the sideline with his long legs and long arms and all of that. I thought going into the training camp, he was the favorite to be the number 2 corner this year. Obviously, Jalen Watson won that job with a bullet. I think Williams will get the first go, and then it ends up being a twofold coaching choice for Steve Spagnuolo and to some extent Dave Merritt. I'll be interested to see, and if they agree with my theory, even it's not really my theory. Also, other people talked about it. If you think, we can let Joshua Williams man up a pretty big physical receiver, but we'd rather not have to have him have too many zone responsibilities when we can avoid it. I'm comfortable with the idea of trying to dictate a little bit of your defense to maximize his skill sets and minimize his weaknesses. I'm also game with giving him a little bit of help when everybody else on your defense, you can feel pretty confident about their one-on-one matchups or just their spots and zones. The problem is both of those things I just mentioned that I think they're going to have to do a little bit of, both of those things take a few pitches out of Steve Spagnuolo's briefcase there. There's a little bit less you can do in terms of total chaotic creativity if you think, well, I'm pretty sure they're helping Joshua Williams here, so I don't think this blitz is coming. Or, well, Joshua Williams is over there and they're in zone, so I'm going to just start my read over there, and if there is some exotic blitz, I'm going to just get it in that direction and kind of pick on Williams a little bit, which is the thing that Watson never allowed for. To say, all right, well, we're not throwing it Trent McDuffie, so just go find the other corner and try to Phillip Gaines that man. It's so unfair. He's just the one for me that is forever cemented as burnt toast. And
Oh.
I'm sorry, Philip Gaines, you don't deserve that. I think didn't Peyton Manning do that to him too?
Yeah.
Was it a Peyton Broncos game?
Who was worse, Philip Gaines or Chris Gaines?
At least Philip Gaines was real. I think Philip Gaines was better at his job than Chris Gaines was at his. So yeah, I think it'll be Williams. You try to help him out a little bit, but I think Spags' preference is to trust that number 2 corner to do their job and to handle their business, so to speak, because then he can continue calling a Spags defense. It's not Spags defense, except, hey, Shamari Connor, can you go over there, keep an eye on what's going on with Josh Williams? And that's the balance, I think.
All right, quickly, I do want to get to end the show with just some AFC trades, just trades in general, and some of the injuries, just a little updates there since some big things have come through. But final Chiefs thought here. Is this the best linebacker group we have seen in KC? Or at least the best they've played? Because with Drew Tranquill, who's been struggling all season long, and I'm a big man, or a big fan of. I'm a big man.
I heard you say I'm a big man. I'll say what I want.
I like giving credit where credit's due. If I've been ripping on someone, or at least having some questions about someone's play, when they come out and play good, I want to give them credit. Drew Tranquill was incredible this past game. I mean, just insanely good. He was everywhere. 3 tackles for loss. The Chiefs had 7 total, but he had 3. He was great in all facets. Leo Chenal has been just dude, everywhere. And you're starting to see him get after the quarterback as a pass rusher. Very impressed with Leo. And then ever since Nick Bolton's slow start, those first 2 games, he was brutal, just atrocious. I really think Nick Bolton's playing some of his best football right now. I guess for me, I'm just giving a huge hat tip to the Chiefs linebackers who they've been better in pass coverage. They've been elite stopping the run. They're starting to get after the quarterback a little bit more. I think this is one of the most underrated groups on the team.
Nationally, maybe we talk about them around here a lot. I feel like I'm pretty saturated in it. Yeah, it's actually what I let off. I'm not, so real quick little sidebar. I'm not like an absolute PFF acolyte. It's just on Tuesdays, I look at the PFF grades and I write about the grades that jump out from the Chiefs performances over on ChiefsOnSI.com. And I led with the linebackers today for 3 reasons, all 3 of those guys. A couple of things just for context. Again, I don't think PFF is gospel. They are subjective grading, but it is a useful tool because you don't get to have box score for how good was he in coverage, right? So a couple of things that jumped out to me from the linebacker analysis from these 3 guys. So Drew Tranquill had the highest grade on the Chiefs in that game per PFF with an 85.3. That's his best single game grade by a mile this year. His best before that was a 62.4. So an absolutely electric game from Tranquill, and you saw it. You saw that on the field. You saw that with your eyes. No surprise, but great to see him have a game like that. Similarly with Leo, even playing slightly less than half the snaps, he ended up with the 5th best grade on the team with a 76.8 from PFF. He also has the 2nd best season-long PFF grade on the defense behind only Chris Jones. Or behind at least defensive starters. Nick Bolton had a 41.7 from PFF, which is completely due to one aspect of his grading. His tackling and run defense grades were right where you'd expect them. From one of them was good and one of them was great. I don't remember the order of which was which. I think his run defense was right there with his average, and it was one of his better tackling games. I might have those 2 mixed up. But he had a 28.9 grade in coverage against the Raiders. I think most of that was probably in the first few drives, because in that first quarter, when the Raiders offense looked competent, it really, even though Najee Johnson ended up being a big conversation and he was concussed later on in that, the issues there were linebackers and safeties. Reed gave up the touchdown. Brock Bowers was feasting. They eventually ended up putting McDuffie on Bowers, and you didn't hear a whole lot from him after that. None of this is like panic button stuff, but I think what you saw from all of those linebackers, I think you'll take the summary of it all, which is huge, well-rounded, best game of the year by a mile from Drew Tranquill, continued excellent weaponization of Leo Chenal, and Nick Bolton had probably his worst, by grading, it was his worst coverage game of the season. I would say, at least functionally, it was his 2nd worst coverage game of the season, perhaps, going back to that Ravens game, having a couple of low lights when he was actively just like returning to football for the first time. I don't think that that's anything against the character of Nick Bolton, though. I think we kind of know run defense and tackling where he's going to make his money, and in coverage, he's had better. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. He's had better days in coverage. It did really drag him though against the Raiders, and I think most of that was from early in the game.
Yeah. I see some folks here. Alan F. When the D-line does their job, the linebackers shine. Very good call. Ronson Trait, which again, love the names. It's just pray we don't have to see Cochran again because we have zero depth. I saw one. Lauren Shakes.
Good news is if you do lose a linebacker, I think they're just going to live life with 2 for a while, by and large. Just end up
True.
with DBs.
Although there is some obviously more safeties getting played with Jaden Hicks and everything, which please stop the block in the backs on special teams. But as far as on the field, he is making a nice impact. But Lawrence Shanks says the Derek Johnson era was really solid too. Yeah, I probably should have said the best linebacker core in the Mahomes era.
Yeah.
But because ain't got nothing on Bobby Bell. Sorry. If we're going back.
I would love to know what Bobby Bell really like. We just need to ask former players throughout NFL history to just like watch 15 Leo Chanel reps and tell us what he thinks, because nobody fires up football guys like Leo Chanel right now. And I think that rules.
You're right. Football guys love Leo. Football dudes love seeing other football dudes do football things.
Guys, so Slothy in the comments saying, taking issue with Brock Bowers was feasting. He had 5 catches for 58 yards. Yeah, like I said, that was all pretty early in the game. And you didn't. Sometimes, and I don't want to pick fights with anybody in particular.
Yeah, I love Slothy. I'm going to take Slothy's side in this, Brisco, as a heads up, because Slothy's my dude. But
well, yeah, but you also have poor listening comprehension, so I don't think that he's the ally. You're the ally that he needs right now, or that they need right now. I said that what you saw on the first drive was that the linebackers and safeties were getting picked on, and you saw Brock Bowers face. Did you watch Brock Bowers and not think that dude is an animal? And then he ends up on Trent McDuffie, and then throughout the rest of the game, he's significantly quieter. I don't know. Can we not say nice things about other players on other teams?
Were you talking about the third drive you said? Sorry, my listening comprehension must not be very good.
I mean, it's simply not. That's okay. We know this about you. I'm willing to deal with that. I know who I'm doing this show with.
Yeah, he said he missed the context. He's in the chat too. So yeah, so be nice to Slothy. Sometimes we fire off tweets and we don't really pay attention. So that's on you, Brisco.
That's fine. I'll take it. My most sensitive frustration in media is that sometimes I work really hard to make sure that I don't misstate or say a stupid thing. Like I really do care about trying to be correct when possible, in addition to being entertaining. And so when I feel like I deliver it okay, and then someone's like, well, why didn't you mention that he was shut out in the second half? Like, well, hold on. Did I not? I thought I said that. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love when Brisco gets a little upset and his voice gets higher. So it's so fun.
I don't know what you mean. Ronson Trait says Josh does get defensive quickly. No, I don't. Go to hell. Richard is just bouncing the chat up and down. That just says Josh gets defensive quickly up and down. I don't realize get defensive quickly. I definitely do on this show, and I think Sterling is also an accelerating factor in that.
Yeah, we know what we're doing here.
Sterling's unfortunately pretty good at poking my buttons. I think I'm pretty good at poking his. Sometimes it's been a long Tuesday, and I lash out. I'm sorry.
And that's why we don't work together every single day.
That's true. We did some great radio on a once a week basis. We do this on a once a week basis. Yeah. It'd be an interesting pairing. You know, Josh Paper Thin Skin. Hey,
Josh,
my name's Joshua. Okay, if you say Josh again, I'll have you blocked. Not defensive.
I see Joshua Uche, who is he from Chiefs Guy in the chat. We talked about him early on. That was the first thing we talked about was Joshua Uche. Again, linebacker, outside linebacker, pass rusher from the Patriots. 2026 sixth rounder going to New England in return. He was great in 2022. A little bit of a down year last year. Overall, nice move. Situational pass rusher. All right, before we get out of here, Deontay Johnson, obviously big move going to the Ravens after Ravens media and Ravens fans on Twitter were like, how much help does Mahomes need? They're scared of Baltimore. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins, and then all of a sudden they go out and get Deontay Johnson. Just really quickly, it's a Deontay Johnson and a sixth being traded for a fifth. Well, the Ravens are going to be one of the best teams record-wise in the NFL. So that 5th rounder, and the Panthers are the worst team in the NFL, that spot might be like 3 or 4 spots off. So they basically traded Deontay Johnson for a swap of about 4 picks. That tells me either Deontay Johnson is the worst locker room guy in the history of the world, or the Panthers are just the bleeping Panthers and have no idea how to do business.
Yeah, I went to the same place. I don't think I've heard a whole bunch of stuff about Deontay Johnson being some sort of like really difficult personality. That reputation hasn't really preceded him, even if there's a little bit of smoke to that. It's like like you said, it might be a 5-pick move up, and the Panthers are eating a bunch of the salary. It's very confusing. I mean, the Panthers have sold low before, and they will sell low again. Like, that just might be the David Tepper Panthers. They're just sort of delusional in some way that ends up costing them. But
they'll buy
really
real high for Bryce Young.
Really, yeah, I know. No kidding. Buy high, sell low is the Carolina Panthers story right now. I guess that's how Tepper made all of his money. I would have done that in an absolute heartbeat if I was the Chiefs. I would have done a pre-Hopkins trade, post-Hopkins trade. I would have done that in a second. If you could have made it a 5th for a 7th and say, all right, we're moving back 30 whatever picks. Although I don't know exactly where the Chiefs picks end up being. I would have entertained a lot of other ways to make that trade happen. And again, I feel okay about the state of the receiver room now. I think Hopkins looked great on Sunday. And I think you get a semi-healthy Juju, hopefully, and things start to smooth out again. Would have made that trade in a nanosecond. And the fact that the Chiefs were poking around Deontay Johnson this last offseason, I think probably means that they didn't have any like super character concern red flags. It's a really, really bizarre trade for the Panthers. Great for the Ravens.
Yeah, but bizarre. And they didn't even eat all that. From the first thing I saw was they're not even eating the contract. Like they're like the Panthers are paying most of the contract off.
Really bizarre.
So yeah, very, very weird. But everyone, thank you guys so much for hanging with us. I had a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground on this Tuesday edition of the Arrowhead Addict podcast. If you want more Chiefs talk, which I know you guys do, make sure you check out Brisco in about a half hour on Only Weird Games. You want more Brisco. On that show, he actually has thick skin. That's the difference. That's the difference.
I have to on that show, actually. Yeah, that's true.
So I appreciate you guys for being here. And I really hope that you guys can give us a nice little 5-star review. Hopefully you guys
who cares?
Well, I would like it. It makes
If you don't like me, if you don't like me, leave 1 star.
No. We want to keep it close. We're like 4.8 stars out of 5. Like we got
a 5-star review that says Josh carries this show solo, or leave a 1-star review. I don't care. Leave a 5-star review that says Josh isn't sensitive.
I'll be back tomorrow with Adam Best on Wednesday.
Because apparently nobody wants me anymore.
There'll be a special Halloween edition coming out on Thursday, so stay tuned for that one as well. For Josh Brisco, who does have thick skin, for myself, Sterling Holmes, for Richard, for all you guys hanging out here, what?
You're uninvited from my Halloween party.
We are out.